Spraying water onto your beans before you grind them seems completely ridiculous at first, but it turns out to be an excellent way to improve your espresso. RDT can help reduce static when grinding, and by preventing clumps from forming, it can also reduce channeling and improve consistency. A while back, a scientific paper from the legendary Chris Hendon and a video from the also legendary James Hoffman caused us to experiment with using more water for our RDT in the promise that we'd see higher extraction. And guess what? We did. Turns out a little more water can be better. This revelation was exciting, but slowly I noticed a little voice somewhere in the depths of my mind growing louder. More, it said. Over and over. More. Today I'll be listening to that voice, casting reason aside, and putting more and more RDT water on my beans until, presumably, something terrible happens. The experiment here is simple. We'll dial in a standard 1 to 2 30-second shot using our Mignon Oro and Profitec Move with a fairly standard 2 sprays of RDT. We'll then give it a taste and measure extraction with our trusty refractometer. From there, we'll continue on adding 2 sprays for each round. First 4 sprays as Hendon recommended, then 6 sprays, 8 sprays, and so on, only stopping once the grinder makes us. Will we unlock new heights of extraction and consistency, or will we kill an innocent grinder for absolutely no reason? There's only one way to find out. So that 4 spray shot pulled just about the same as the 2 spray shot, no big change there. Right to a recipe, 20 grams in, 40 out, 30 seconds. Very boring. Yeah, in terms of flavor, just about what I'd expect from Kickstep. The first shot we pulled with the 2 sprays, just for reference, with our dial-in, was right around 19.7% extraction, which is spot on. That's exactly, right in the window you want it to be in. This tastes pretty similar, and I expect it to be pretty close. But yeah, nicely balanced. Nothing weird about it. Rich, smooth, little bit of bitterness at the end, but, to be expected. But let's get extraction and see what we have there. Yeah, so it looks like at the end, after letting it cool off a bit, we've got a TDS of about 9.84, which gives us an extraction of 19.68, which is a tiny bit lower than our 2 spray shot. This is one of the limitations of doing such a narrow experiment. We only have 1 point of data for each set of sprays, and that's understood and intentional. It's very much on the same mark as the first shot, which is mostly what we'd expect. It's not higher, but that's just, subtle variations in pulling a single shot of espresso. The real intention here is to test both the limits of the grinder and to see if extreme measures produce extreme results. This, as we said at the beginning, is an average test, and it's produced a very average, reliable result. So from here, we'll go on to the uncharted waters and use an unreasonable amount of water, starting with 6 sprays of RDT, and seeing if that changes our results in a dramatic fashion. Before we continue on into the unknown, I want to make it clear that I do not advise you to put these larger volumes of water into your grinder. While we're quite comfortable saying that a few sprays of RDT is fine, everything after this point is, let's just stick with inadvisable. From our 6 spray shot, we saw a pretty noticeable slowdown. Instead of just over 31 seconds. From our previous shot, we had 35 seconds for a 40 gram output. I have noticed additional RDT slowdown shots before, but that's a little more extreme. It's not that different of a shot. The acidity is hitting me a little bit more. It does feel like it has a little bit more of a punch. I feel like maybe I like it a little bit more than the last ones, but let's see what the extraction percentage is. Right off the bat, TDS of 10.08, which is a pretty significant increase. Not crazy, but notable. It gives us an extraction of 20.16%. So still very much like square in the middle of where you want to be with espresso, but a notable uptick right off the bat. There were a few interesting things that I noticed. We've been weighing the portafilter after grinding with the grounds in it to see if we're losing anything to retention, because I'm afraid that adding a lot of moisture to the grinder is going to dramatically increase retention. We were 0.1 gram down from where we started. I don't know if that's a huge deal right now, but I'm curious if that trend will continue. And then, pulling the shot a little longer, it's going to increase extraction a little bit, but considering we're pulling to the same ratio, this is still an interesting result to me. A lot brighter than I would expect for Kickstep pulled for 35 seconds. Overall, interesting, nothing too crazy so far. I am interested to see how 8 sprays goes. Already, just getting the beans to go down the hopper is becoming a challenge. So for our 8 spray shot, our shot is getting even slower. We got 41 grams in 38 and a bit seconds. I think it was 38 point something. So seems to be the trend that more water is gonna be slowing us down. I don't know if I like this one quite as much. It doesn't have the same acidic intensity. It is sort of a little more rounded and sweet, but it's in a weird kind of dull way. Maybe a little bit more of an acrid hit on the back of your tongue right at the end. Let's get extraction on this, see what we're working with. The results are we got 9.89, 9.9 roughly for our TDS, which gives us, for 41 grams up from a 20 gram dose, 20.27% extraction. So we're still going up now. Of course, these shots are longer. This isn't a perfect test here, but just goes to show that adding more water is definitely considerably slowing down our shots, and pulling to the same ratio, we're getting way more out of them. You may have noticed that we're using a little pitcher here. One of the things with a refractometer is keeping the temperature of your samples consistent is very important for getting consistent readings. Cooling down the espresso is the main thing there. And we have all these pitchers in the fridge, and I have, for this test, been putting our sample into the pitcher to cool it off rapidly and then get it straight to room temperature for our test, which has been huge because that removes a variable for us and it works very well. Anyway, with that out of the way, we're seeing incremental changes here. We're slightly moving upwards, seeing our shots go slightly longer. I want to see more dramatic results. This isn't getting exciting quickly enough. So we're gonna go from 8 to 12 sprays, which I think is a truly unreasonable amount. It's like 1.2 grams of water. Handily, this spray is like 0.1 grams per spray, so it's very, very consistent. So we'll jump to 12, and we'll see how that goes, and if we can even get it through the grinder in the first place, or if we get it all back out. Let's see what happens. 12 sprays was certainly the worst looking shot we've had so far. It looked like tar at the beginning of our shot, which is never a great sign. And then we had some pretty extreme channeling in the middle and towards the end. We got, in the end, 42 grams in about 37.5 seconds. So our shot isn't going longer for the same ratio, but it looks a lot worse. So that's interesting. I did notice immediately when we dumped the grounds into the portafilter, there was a lot more clumping going on. One of the benefits of RDT, theoretically, is reducing clumping. I think past a certain point, we might be entering a new system of clumping. And I'm guessing that those clumps, despite distribution efforts, are resulting in a lot more channeling, because this tastes like a shot with channeling. This is not horrible, but there's a lot more muddiness. The acidity and sweetness are kind of just middling. There's the acrid flavors kind of all the way through the shot. The sort of chocolatey notes you want are sort of just turning into a weird general bitterness. I'm not that surprised based on how it looked, but let's see how extraction looks. Okay, so for TDS, we got 9.22, and that means for extraction, with a 40 gram yield, we have 18.44%, which is the lowest extraction that we've had thus far. Doesn't really surprise me that much. We have definitely gone past the point where RDT is useful, but I did say that I came here and we were gonna grind until the grinder could grind no more. And so that's what we're gonna do. And we're gonna jump from 12 sprays to 20 sprays and just see what happens, just for the love of the game. Our 20 spray shot didn't go great, which you'll have just seen, presumably. This is hopefully about 40 grams. There was so much channeling and so much spraying that it teared the scale for us, so kind of have to eyeball it. Yeah, that's disgusting. It's uniquely disgusting. There's almost a fishiness there that is uniquely unpleasant. It's mostly just bitter. The acidity is not really shining through in any way. It looked like a horrible shot. And it tastes like a horrible shot. Let's get extraction and then reflect on that a little bit. We consolidated what we have of this shot. Looks like it was about a 30 gram shot, not quite 40 grams. You know, the time for that shot was something like just over 40 seconds, which is a lot. The TDS is 10.93%, which is stronger than a lot of our previous tests. But since we only have 30 grams, that comes out to 16.4% extraction, which is obviously quite under extracted, even for my tastes. The goal here was to say, if more RDT water is better, should we just keep adding more? I think roundly the answer is no, you shouldn't do that, and 4 sprays is definitely enough, because what we found on the other side of that limit is mostly pain. So we've shown that you can do 6 or so sprays at the most, and you might get more returns in terms of extraction. I think the takeaway here, though, is 2 to 4 sprays between 0.2 and 0.4 grams of water is just fine. And there's a reason why Chris Hend and his friends stopped there. And the little voice in my head that told me to do more water should not have been listened to and should have stayed right there in my head. I hope that this experiment was maybe slightly more entertaining than reading a scientific publication. But with that all aside, let's crack open the grinder and see what damage we did in there. The Mignon is normally quite good at not producing a lot of retention, and I made sure this thing was relatively clean when we started. And in a very short span of time, we've ended up with a thick, solid layer of ultrafine particles turned into basically a horrible crust around the edge of the grinder, which explains some of the retention that we were seeing, and also why you shouldn't put that much water in your grinder. I feel like we've gotten pretty conclusive results here, but I hope that this felt like a fun experiment that maybe you would be interested in doing at home, but shouldn't and maybe can't do at home without risking your equipment. Thankfully, our Mignon Oro made it through just fine, but the takeaway is stick to 2 to 4 sprays, and that's all you need. For more Espresso experiments, subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching.